Professor Solo, how are you doing today?
Hi, Ronan. I'm glad to be here.
We had a wellness day yesterday. Got a little mental health break. Don't have a spring break this year, which kind of sucks. But make the best of it with a day off. Before you hopped on your day, you said you didn't really get a day off, which kind of life of being a professor, I guess, right?
That's right.
Yeah, it happens to everyone. So, Professor Solo, before we kick off to how you got into be a supply chain management professor at Penn State, where did you originally go to college?
Well, as fate would have it, I'm a Penn State grad. I graduated in 1994. I was a mathematics major, and I was also involved in ROTC while I was an undergrad.
It's really interesting how supply chain management, as I'm learning about it from Professor Solo's class, that there is a lot of mathematics behind it. So I'm sure that helped you out going into that field, especially mathematics in general. Like there's I've only taken Calc 1, so I can't really speak for anything else. But math, like they tell you that these harder mathematic classes are really really hard. Everyone said, oh, they're so stupid, I'm never going to apply it. But it uses your brain in a different way, because these are things that are really hard to figure out. And it's a different kind of problem solving that people aren't used to solving before.
Yeah, that's right. For folks who end up taking up math classes, I think I looked back. I think I took 15 math classes as an undergrad to get the math major. Um, and I will never use some of that material that I covered for sure. But I have used some. But you touched on it, Ron, in an area like that. I find that it develops a certain way of thinking. So even if the course doesn't seem totally relevant, I'm sure I felt that a lot of the times in the classes I took, and I struggled in a lot of those classes. Uh, it certainly developed the way I think, and sort of that. I hate to use the cliche of critical thinking because you hear that all the time, but it really did that. It made me learn how to think through a problem in steps. Uh, and I use that today, of course, in a lot of the stuff that I do. So I think it's very appropriate. Um, and I would advise students not to discount taking a harder class like that, because you might learn something from it that you weren't quite expecting.
Yeah, no, I like the way that you put that, because it's not, at the end of the day, like you were saying, how often am I going to use this really advanced mathematics skill once or twice maybe, and that's it. But it really teaches you something else, rather than critical thinking, using your brain in a different way that you haven't been using it before. And that's what's interesting about these harder level classes, though it is something that you might use once or twice in your college career or professional career, that it gives you a different way of thinking. But you also said that you were involved in ROTC. So did you originally go into college thinking that's what you wanted to do?
No, I sure didn't. The summer before I started my freshman year, a family friend suggested that I look at ROTC, if for no other reason that there might be an opportunity to get a scholarship. And a scholarship can help anyone out in school, but I was in a position where that would have been a huge help to me. So I looked into it as I arrived at Penn State. I had no intention of doing that beforehand, and it ended up leading to a full career for me.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. Like you were saying, at the beginning of it, I thought I just needed the scholarship more than anything else. Like it wasn't something that I was
Yeah,
originally going to pursue. And it's funny how, full circle comes around, and that's what you did after college originally, correct?
that's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
so that's what I think is really interesting. So what branch did you originally go into? Because I know that ROTC here, I know that there's different, I think they're called branches. I'm not an expert or anything on that in the military process, but they have different branches that you get sectioned into, and then from there you kind of do work in that branch, and then from there they kind of set you up with a job. So what did you originally go into when you came to Penn State?
Yeah, so in ROTC, you're able to choose the branch that you want to go into. So all the services have programs. And at Penn State, we have a fairly big ROTC presence here, and we have for decades. Uh, so you can choose Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and now the new Space Force too. So I went into Air Force ROTC, and that was based on the recommendation of that family friend. And I didn't know a whole lot about it. Uh, But I started to like the program itself, and I certainly made some really great friends who turned out to be lifelong friends. And I felt like that's where I belong. It gave me that sense of belonging my freshman year, which a lot of students are looking for, whether they know it or not. And I didn't join because I was looking for somewhere to belong. I joined for the reason I told you. But once I was in there, I decided this is where I want to be and this is what I want to do. Even though at the time I didn't quite know what the future would hold as far as my uh, jobs after college.
And it's really interesting what you were saying that, you don't go into something, thinking about, as originally you were saying, like I did it for the scholarship more than anything else. But
Yeah,
what's nice about being a part of like an organization, especially when you're a freshman in college, like that bubble gets popped that you're used to your entire life. Of like, you have your hometown friends and, you might have a couple people from your high school that come to college. But at the end of the day, you're looking to, reach out, make some new friends, meet some new people. That's what college is about. And what's cool about ROTC, athletics, clubs, different thon organizations, and all that, it really opens you up to these new groups of friends. And like you were saying, they could become your lifelong friends because you really didn't know them. Especially college is a hard time for a lot of students and a lot of I don't like I think the real term is kids. I think you're a kid till you're like 25, 23, whenever it is, because you're
48.
still yeah, you're still getting used to life. Like that's like the whole point. Like college, more than anything else, it teaches you how to, live on your own.
Right.
And, there is an educational process to it, and that's great. But there's also other things outside of the classroom that college is really good at teaching people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I found a lot of that through my involvement in the ROTC program.
Yeah, it's like finding your little, Penn State and some other colleges are huge and seem overwhelming to, students when, when you're going over like your college visits and you're like, wow, this is a big university. I can't really see that here. But the
Right.
thing is, you have to find your little niche within the college. Like your
Yep.
niche was ROTC. I was a cheerleader up until like 2 weeks ago, and it gives you like a sense of belonging, put that in air quotes, but it gives you a group of people that you can, go through the rest of college with. So, skipping forward a little bit. So, what did you think, ROTC really taught you besides, having good friends, giving you a opportunity to stay at Penn State with the scholarship? What else did you think it taught you in terms of, life lessons or things like that?
Well, I started being in a program like that. I started to realize that I was joining. This is also going to sound a little cliche, Ronan, but I joined something that was bigger than just me. Um, I was in an organization that I didn't really know what my Air Force job or jobs would be after I graduated, but I was in an organization where uh, we all sort of had the same mission, and we were all, regardless of what our jobs were, we were all doing this kind of for the same purpose, and that's for the, kind of defending the country, that sort of thing. And and then you really feel like you're on a team, and you're all kind of driven, maybe for various reasons, but you're driven toward the same purpose. And maybe I didn't say that kind of thing when I was 20 or 19, but in hindsight, I can look back and say, heck yeah, my friends and I, we were all really excited about what we were doing. We were excited about the prospect of a military career ahead of us. A lot of folks were excited at the opportunity to maybe go fly in the military, and there was sort of this sense of adventure that was coming ahead.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I like what you were saying about how, we all had our own personal reasons for doing ROTC or whatever, you could put that into anything, own personal reason to join a club. But at the end
Yeah,
of the day, there's this prime mission that everyone has subconsciously in the back of their head, like joining ROTC, defending the country, helping, serve and protect, the United States of America, which is awesome. But the thing is, everyone had this goal subconsciously. I know you're not thinking of it 24 hours of the day or like that, but it's something to work towards and that everyone can get behind in that organization, which is really awesome. And that's a crucial part to any team, really. Everyone needs to be driven towards a similar goal in order to achieve the things that they want to achieve.
yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah. So now, so after graduating college, what did you do with? I know that you went into the Air Force Academy there. So what was that like for you?
Well, I'll give you a quick rundown of the jobs that I did. Um, you can't really see ahead of like the next job that you're getting into. So when I graduated, I actually had about a 6-month break after graduation until they could have a spot for me on active duty. So I went home to the Pittsburgh area and just worked in construction for a summer. I'd already graduated, and I wasn't really looking for any kind of long-term position anywhere. So I just went and did some, kind of some fun summer work. And then in November, I got my orders and I went to Goodfellow Air Force Base in Texas, where I attended Air Force intelligence officer training. So that lasted about 9 months, and I left there and went to uh, Osan Air Base in South Korea. And I'd never been overseas before, and so my first overseas experience was moving overseas, which was really exciting, especially going to a place that was really different than where I'd been in different than my comfort zone. Let's put it that way. Um, so I spent a year over there and absolutely loved it. Worked with awesome people, folks who were totally dedicated to the mission. Had a lot of fun, traveled a lot, learned a lot for sure. And then at the end of that year, I came back to the U.S., worked in Washington, D.C. Um, at the Defense Intelligence Agency for 3 years, and kind of got to see a whole different side of the military, and worked in conjunction with a lot of civilians, which I hadn't done before because I was in a strictly military unit, and really enjoyed that. Got to do some more traveling, and then I kind of switched gears in the Air Force, and I went into a different career field. I went into what we call acquisition program management. So you can think of that as sort of a mix of research and development and procurement, that sort of thing, logistics. That's where I started to get a little taste of supply chain management. And I went up to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. Um, and I had I had a couple of jobs up there. The first, I worked in a system program office. So this is an office that manages the development of aircraft systems. And I worked on the F-15 fighter program. So I helped develop some software for that jet so that it can drop certain weapons. And then I also helped manage the production of new jets. And what's interesting there, Ronan, was I was in my mid to late 20s, and I was managing a program that was valued at $750 million. And that was intimidating. I didn't feel like I was really qualified to balance my own checkbook at that point, let alone the government's checkbook of almost $1 billion. So now I wasn't writing the checks, okay, but I was responsible for day-to-day activities that where that money was on the line. And that is a huge responsibility. And I started to realize at that point that that's one thing that the military does, regardless of the branch. The military is very good at heaping huge amounts of responsibility on young people. And I mean that in a good way, because I think that my peers at that point outside of the military probably were not in equivalent positions. My counterpoint in the civilian side, so the program manager on the military contractor side that I was working with, this guy was like in his 50s, had been doing this job for 30 years, and here I was in my mid 20s as his counterpart. So there was a lot of learning to do, but what a great experience. And at that point, I said, I think I need to start thinking about graduate school, because as a military officer, you're probably not going to progress beyond maybe the 10 or 12 year point if you don't have at least a master's degree. And the Air Force said, hey, we have our own graduate engineering program. It's a school called the Air Force Institute of Technology, right there in Dayton, Ohio. And they said, well, you have a math undergraduate degree, so we'll let you do a master's degree in operations research, which I said, okay. And then I had to look up what operations research meant because I wasn't familiar with the term, right? And for those who don't know, it's a field of like applied mathematics where you take math and statistics and similar techniques and you apply them to solve problems, like real world problems in, let's say, transportation or manufacturing or military issues, you name it, sales. Um, and so I started that program. It was a very fast 18-month master's program. And so when I did that, I was still on active duty. I was still wearing my uniform, but my job every day for 18 months was to go to graduate school. So it was a fantastic opportunity to get paid and to have my school paid for at the same time. So I made it through that program, and then I was sort of reassigned into a third career field, which was called operations research analyst. So today we might think of that as like an analytics person or a data analyst or a business analyst or business analytics person, something like that. So I was sent off then to Peterson Air Force Base, which is in Colorado Springs, Colorado, which was at the time, the headquarters for Air Force Space Command. That headquarters has now become its own separate military branch called the U.S. Space Force. And I worked in an analysis division there that we kind of did modeling and computer modeling and simulation of future space systems. So think of future satellites and that sort of thing. So some pretty high-tech stuff, using those skills in programming and math and statistics and computer modeling to try to determine what are the best weapon systems we should have in the future without spending all the money and building prototypes now to only find out that they wouldn't really work. So I worked with some super smart people there, folks who were involved in investigating the space shuttle crash that had happened around that time. I mean, these were one deep world experts. I really felt like a fish out of water. Just didn't quite feel like I was up to the level that these folks were, but it amazes me the folks that we have in government and in the military and the kind of problems they're solving. So that kind of really kept my interest in academics. And I said, well, maybe I should look on to further academics. And a friend of mine that I was working with said, hey, right up the road, 20 minutes is the Air Force Academy, which as your listeners would probably know, Ronan, it's an undergraduate school, a 4-year undergraduate school where once you come out, then you're commissioned in the Air Force or now also the Space Force as an officer, just like in ROTC. But they have to have folks who teach up there. So I went up there and interviewed for a teaching position while I'm still active duty at the time and was accepted to come teach in the math department. And they said, well, we'll bring you in to teach math, but first we want you to go get a PhD. And I after that tough master's program, I really didn't have any intention of going back to school. Just like a lot of folks who are undergrads say, I am never going back to college again, right? But you never know what's going to happen in the future. And I thought, wow, what a great opportunity now. They said I could go back to school for 3 years, get paid my salary, still be on active duty, earning credit towards retirement, and earning a PhD for free. Now, I'm not saying that's easy to do, but I looked ahead and said, maybe this will open some doors for me in the future. So then the difficult choice at that point was to figure out where to go to school. So as I mentioned, I'm a Penn State grad as an undergraduate, and so is my wife. And she said, hey, if we went back to Penn State, would you be able to get us football tickets? And I said, you bet. So while a lot of people will go to schools based on the reputation of a particular researcher or professor that they'd like to work at, or a specialty area that they'd like to do research in, my rationale was Saturdays in Beaver Stadium, because I knew what that experience was, and that brought me back. And oh, by the way, Penn State's a pretty good school. So we came back for 3 years, and I worked in the industrial engineering department on a PhD in IE and operations research, which was kind of like more of what I had done as a master's student. Finished that program in 3 years, and by the way, those 3 years were awesome, right? To be back on campus, no longer as an 18-year-old, but now kind of as an adult. I had kids, I had a house and 2 cars. like I was like a real person at this point, like I felt like an adult, and I was back on campus going to classes again, at a place that I loved, that I really grew up in. So I finished that program and then went right back to Colorado and taught there in the Air Force Academy for 4 years in the math department. And I taught a variety of um, statistics and operations research related courses, and loved it. Um, I was also the faculty advisor for the women's tennis team out there. And I traveled around the country with their Division I women's tennis team as a sort of like a PR specialist or a military rep for the team. And that was a blast. That got me out of the classroom, and it got me to see the other side of what those students, those cadets might experience when they're not in the classroom. So I had a great time. Then it was time after 4 years to leave Colorado again. And I went back into the intelligence career field. So kind of went back to my origins in the Northern Virginia area, and spent a couple of years doing some really neat stuff. Again, a lot of travel, which I really enjoyed. And then, Ronan, at this part, I started getting to that age where my kids were getting into middle school, and I was starting to think a little bit more about them than myself. And I don't mean that to sound so noble, but I started to look ahead a few years, which sometimes is hard for us to do. And I said, okay, if I take another job in the Air Force, and this one was going to be overseas in an embassy, which I had wanted to, what's that mean for my kids? And it meant they were going to have to move again. My daughter would probably have to finish high school at a new school. So do her senior year at a completely new high school. And you can imagine that's probably not the first choice for every, high school senior to do. So I turned down that job opportunity, and I said, okay, if I can find me a teaching job or some other job up in State College, that's where I'm going. Because my wife and our hearts were in State College. We wanted to come back to Happy Valley. We'd had 2 stints here and wanted to make it permanent. And sure enough, got a teaching job in Smeal College of Business. Was offered that position, and I said, yep, let's do it. It's kind of scary. It's a huge life change when you kind of walk away from one career to start a new one, but we did it. And here we are. Now I'm on your show.
So first of all, gotta say, the resume is tremendous. Before anything else. Yeah, no, but that's what I like about like you have this upbeat attitude about it. And like you were saying, you have to take a real big pivot in your life. And that's something that people have trouble doing. It's that part of, getting a little bit uncomfortable rather than doing the same thing that you're taught to do over and over and over again. And I like that you were able to make that transition. And, maybe it wasn't what you thought was going to happen. Like, obviously, like you said, you loved working, for the military and the, intelligence office and all these things, but you took a little pivot into, now I'm a professor at Penn State, which is something that you probably didn't think you were going to do 10 years before. And something else that I want to touch on is that when you were saying that, I was this middle 20-year-old to late 20-year-old, and you were working with, almost $1 billion. Yeah. And that you felt like you weren't like up to that standard. But what I think is that's what's cool about, professions and just like businesses in general, is that I think that more and more today that people think of age as just a number rather than, anything else. Now, granted, if you are older, you have more experience, you're more wise, all of that jazz. Like, it's just, you've been here longer more than anything else. But what's interesting is that they had, the trust in you to be able to, manage this. And I'm sure at most times it felt like the weight of the world was on your shoulders working with that much money, right?
Yeah, right.
But the thing that you're able to do is, I'm sure that, that stresses anyone out, right? We're all human at the end of the day. That's a lot of money unless you're Jeff Bezos. But you're able to manage that with all these different moving pieces. So how did you think that the balance between all these, and it at like multiple times in your life, in your career or professional career, that you had the you're juggling like 15 things at once. How are you able to do that?
That's a good question, Ronan. You know, at this point, like these points you're talking about in my career, I was starting to build a family. And so now not only am I juggling my job, but I'm juggling family. Just like a lot of students have relationships in school and they're trying to juggle your personal life and balance things out with your academic life. That doesn't stop when you leave college. Um, the stakes get maybe a little bit higher because you've got to perform well in your job to stay in your job. But not everyone can do that balancing act very well, and you have to work at it. Uh, so you can throw 100% of yourself into your job, but if you're leaving your family and your friends in the dust, it's not really doing you any good. So I'll give you an example of a balancing act. When I was in grad school in the Air Force, I can remember coming home in the evening around dinner time and helping my wife with dinner. And we had our first child, and he was just a month or two old, helping to bathe him and maybe spend a couple minutes with him before his bedtime. And then hanging out with my wife, who was exhausted from taking care of this baby. And then she would go to bed kind of early. And then I would pack up and go back to school. Um, so I would try to give them my time that I could, but then as soon as they were kind of put to bed, let's say 9:30, I would head back to school and I'd work till 12, 1, 2 in the morning, just like you often do as an undergrad. Um, I had to get the work done, right? I was getting paid to do this and earn my degree, and I had to do it, but I didn't want to go straight through and not see my family. So I'd get back at 2 in the morning, tiptoe into the house, crawl in bed, and then wait for the baby to start crying and get up and help in the middle of the night. And that's a balancing act that, not everyone will build a family, and not everyone will do it at the same time. But there are other aspects of your professional, academic, and personal lives that I think it's just really important to try to balance. And it's not like I went through that part of my life saying, okay, today I'm going to really work on balancing my life, right? I mean, we don't always pause to think that way. That sounds very textbook and sort of life coach-ish, right? You do your thing, right? You do what's making you happy, and you do what you know you have to do, just like you deal with your day-to-day life. And so I don't know if we always know when we're learning, right? You're just going through life. Like right now during this podcast, Ronan, we're both learning something. We don't really know what it is yet, but maybe in a month we look back and go, oh yeah, it was really cool. Here's what I got out of it. So now I look back at, yeah, here's how I learned how to balance part of my life back then. And you always try to do that. I mean, if you want to have healthy relationships and be successful professionally and academically, you have to maintain that balance. And that's just one example of where I can remember it being a struggle for sure, but making it through.
Yeah, and everyone's doing different things at the same time. That's what I think a lot of people. I'm a big Gary Vaynerchuk guy, so he goes like that. You just figure it out on your own, pretty much. Like it's whatever you're gonna do, you're gonna do. It's not that you can figure out how to do everything in your day if you really like all the things that you're doing. If you're not, you're gonna slack off on one of them, not want to do this. You're gonna be miserable when you get home. And then it's not fair for everyone. No one's having a good time at that
You
point.
got it.
But that's what's very interesting about, balancing your life. And I like asking that question to a lot of people that, juggle a lot of things, because it's a different story for everyone. How I learned to do this, how I learned to do that. What did I, how do I, cope with, doing school, doing teaching, having a family and all this, and everyone's at different stages of their life. And I just think like that's a really interesting thing that people need to like listen to, at least, because, hey, Professor Solo can do it. Maybe I can give this a shot. Maybe this will work for me. Maybe I can apply this to my life. And that's what's very interesting. Also, probably being a supply management teacher helps with that as well. I didn't even think about that, managing how to put certain things in different, in order to work as efficiently as possible. But something else that I want to ask you is like, how do you like your job now compared to what you did before?
Yeah, I love it, Ronan. It's different. And when I retired from the military, everyone told me, it's going to be a big change. It's a big change for everyone, just getting out of that that sort of family and that organization, like I talked about when I started in ROTC at 18. I felt like I had joined a group with a mission and it's a family. And it was like that the whole time, even though I crossed uh, through all those different military assignments that I kind of rattled off to you. It was always the same organization, right? We were just different people and we were in different locations doing a variety of different jobs in my case. And now it is different, but I love it. And I tell you, the thing I love most about my job right now is, again, I don't mean to sound cliche about it, but helping young people kind of find their way and introducing them to new things. So, for instance, I teach Supply Chain Management 301. It's a course that every student in SMEAL takes. Most of the students, I think, coming into the class don't know anything about it. They might have heard something from a roommate or a friend, and then they get into the class and they start to see there's all this stuff that they didn't even know was out there in the business world. We cover a lot of topics in that course, kind of a survey course. And sure enough, at the end of almost every semester when I teach that course, I have students coming up to me saying, I didn't even know this stuff existed. And I think it's really cool. And I think I found what I'm interested in. And, in some cases, I'm changing my major. And I'm not out to recruit. I mean, that's not my job. But that's pretty exciting when students start to find something that, they're really excited about. And that makes the job very fulfilling, right? Not writing exams, not grading, okay, but interacting with students like you and I are doing, or like I do during office hours, or even in the classroom. And I've always interacted with people in my job. That was always part of my job. But now I'm in a kind of a different role, similar to what I was doing when I taught at the Air Force Academy, which of course gave me a little bit of the background I needed to find my way into my current job. But if you ask me what my favorite part is, it's interacting with the students and sort of opening things up for students and helping them sort of explore. Now, in my particular role, what's out there in the business world, or maybe more specifically, what supply chain management is about. I also teach graduate level business analytics courses. So I do the same sort of thing there with graduate students, sort of open things up to them, and then they go and explore and figure it out. I don't know what all's out there, but I can at least maybe nudge the door open a little bit for students.
And yeah, that what's nice about I think it's just a general human nature to have this feeling that like if I help someone, it's like a good feeling on the inside. At least to me, I don't want to speak for everyone, but there is some sense of internal feeling of good when you do help other people out. And that's what like the role of a professor is, or teacher, high school teacher, and more than anything else. At the end of the day, grades are grades, numbers are numbers. You want your students to learn, obviously, but nonetheless, you want to be able to help them out. Because like we were saying before, college is a weird time for a lot of people. If they need help, I'm going to try and offer it to them. I'm going to do whatever I can, at least in my ability, to help that student do whatever they do. Something else that I want to touch on before we wrap this up is, so teaching at Penn State, why do you like teaching at Penn State so much rather than, in the Air Force Academy? Is it a real different environment compared to that?
Oh, sure. There's a stark difference between the two. I mean, the Air Force Academy was a very rigid academic experience for students. Uh, they're in their uniforms every day when they go to class. It's very small class sizes. I typically had just 20 to 30 students in a class in all the classes I taught. And those students also have to balance what they're doing there academically with all of their military duties. So they all have jobs within their military structure in the academy, just like all of the other service academies do. And those students, when I talk to Penn State students and they start to say, "Oh, I'm so busy, I don't know how I'm going to do it," I say, "Hey, let me tell you something. You can do it, because I've seen students do this and a lot of other stuff." So, what's different about it and why I like being at Penn State? Well, part of it is I feel like I came home. I started here like you, I think, when I was 18 to 21 or 22, I guess. And, that's a big time of when you're growing up and you're kind of really developing into the adult that you're going to be, because you're transitioning. Think about it. You transition from high school to the working world, post college, right? It's that 4-year period, maybe 5 or 6 years for some students, but you make that transition. And I get to come back to that, and I'm teaching students, and I can talk to them and say, look, I went to school here. I know what this experience can be like, right? I know what different classes are like. I've sat in some of the same classrooms that I now teach in, which is a little bit weird at times, because I can remember myself as an 18 or 19-year-old student sitting in the same room that I'm now teaching a class in. So I think a big part of what I like is that I can relate to the students here. This is like home to me. It means a lot to me. And I think my students find that I'm passionate about Penn State and passionate about teaching here. And that makes the job great. That's what keeps me here. I get a little bit of a paycheck too. You got to have that to put some food on the table. But what job could I have that's better than the one I have? I'm back at home. I'm teaching students who are kind of following in footsteps that I was in years ago, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's like you're the very definition of being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes because you've done it before. And
Yeah.
that's what, the whole, definition of empathy and being empathetic is, and understanding that, oh, I understand where you are because I did the same thing. Like, here, maybe I can help you with this. Maybe it's, maybe you got to switch this up. Maybe you're doing too much or whatever it may be. And that's what's cool about a lot of professors, because they understand where you were because they did the same thing, however long ago it may be.
Sure.
And they're able to help you out, not only in the academic process, like we were talking about before, there's something going on, like, how do I manage doing this class and this class, and I want to double major, and like, how do you feel about this? All these different possibilities that come with college, and that you're able to, give a little bit of an insider insight on what that's going to look like and how you can maybe structure it a little bit better in senses of that. But Professor Solo, before we wrap this up, I like to ask this question to all my guests to end the show. What is one piece of wisdom that you want to pass on to the listeners out there?
Yeah, sure, Ronan. I think I share this with my students all the time, especially when they're at students who are in college as undergraduates. They're often trying to find their way, trying to figure out what it is that they want to do with their futures, because they're working really hard right now in classes to be successful, but sometimes they don't quite know what it is they want to be successful at. It's tough. It's tough to come out of high school and be in a position all of a sudden where you have to pick the field that potentially you're going to do for the next 5, 10, or 30 years. And you were just a minute ago a senior in high school. So I often give this advice to my students in that position. I say, look, when you're looking for that thing for you, find something that meets these two needs. First, find something that you're passionate about. Okay. If you find something you're passionate about, you're going to love it. No matter what the situation is, you're going to do well at it, and it's going to be enjoyable. And then find something that not only are you passionate about, but maybe it puts a little bit of food on the table for you, right? We all have to kind of support ourselves, maybe support families. So if you find something that you're passionate about and you can get a good wage or a salary from at the same time, which isn't necessarily the most important thing, okay, but it is a necessity. We have to take care of ourselves and our families. If you find that thing, you've got it, right? You'll be happy. It might not be the highest paying job, might not be the sexiest career field, might not be the greatest location, but if you're able to take care of yourself financially and feed yourself and your family and house, take care of all those basic needs, and you found something you're really passionate about, whether it's marketing or engineering or flying or whatever it ends up being, you'll be happy. And I'm passionate about teaching, and I love it. So I'm going to keep doing it as long as I can, as long as it keeps me happy. And I think if you try that in your search for whatever it is that you're looking for while you're in school and beyond, okay, I think you'll be happy.
Find your passion. make sure you're having fun with it, and also make sure they can, put a nice steak dinner on the table every once in a while.
Even if it's not a steak dinner, Ronan, I mean, you got to put some kind of dinner on the table, right?
Hey,
So
beans and rice are fine by me.
you bet.
All right, Professor Scholler, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It really does mean a lot. Is there anything that you want to plug before, we go on with the rest of our day?
I think I've said it all. Like, those last words of advice, find a passion. And if you don't know how to find that passion, use this time to explore, right? If you're in school, join those groups and those organizations and kind of get out there out of your comfort zone. Try something that you maybe were never familiar with before. You'll meet new folks. You'll have some new experiences. If you don't like it, then stop doing that, right? And then shift gears, try something different, and eventually, hopefully, you'll find that passion. It might take a day, it might take 4 years, it might take 10 years, but you can't stop, because that's gonna, I think, bring you happiness. And I'll leave you with that, Ruben.
Professor Scholler, I love it. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Guys, that's it for another episode of the Ronan Bell Show. I hope you guys are getting through whatever you're getting through. Have a good rest of your day. And as always, y'all just keep on keeping on.